I investigate demonic hauntings in West Virginia. The rules are fatal. They told me the mountains were cursed, older than God, riddled with things that crawl between dimensions. I didn't believe it, not until the McAllister case. In my line of work, there are rules that must never be broken. But what happens when those rules change, and breaking them means death? The first call came in just past midnight, when the sky over West Virginia hangs like a black veil and the hills grow teeth. I was in Charleston, staying in a roadside motel that smelled like mildew and regret. The wallpaper peeled like burned flesh, and the air conditioner wheezed like an old man dying in slow motion. I was reviewing case notes from a failed exorcism in Greenbrier County when my phone buzzed with a withheld number. Normally, I don't answer those. People love to prank demon chasers like me, but something about the air shifted when it rang, a static hum in my bones. I picked it up. A woman's voice, cracked with fear and exhaustion, whispered on the other end, "Are you the one who deals with them?" My silence was her answer. They came back. We followed the rules, every single one, and they still came back. She gave an address in McDowell County, then hung up. The next morning, I packed my equipment into the Jeep. Salt lines, obsidian mirror shards, a rosary soaked in graveyard dirt, a bone whistle car from a deer that died on holy ground, and my leather-bound notebook of field rules, updated after every investigation. There are currently 27 rules. Each was written in blood, metaphorically or otherwise. I arrived at the house just before dusk. It sat on a ridge above a hollow, swaddled in fog, the forest so thick it seemed alive. The house was large but ancient, log frame, stone foundation, windows covered in tinfoil. 3 large crucifixes hung above the porch. One was upside down. I knocked twice. The woman from the call opened the door. Her eyes were hollow, ringed with red, skin paper thin. "You came," she whispered. Her name was Eliza McAllister. Her husband, Jonah, stood behind her, arms crossed, face blank. They lived here with their 6-year-old daughter, Maisie. She hadn't spoken a word in 3 days. Inside, the house was stifling, windows sealed, mirrors covered, clock stopped. A thick layer of ash lined the hearth, and a bowl of river stones sat in every corner. They were following traditional Appalachian counterspells. That wasn't surprising. What had surprised me was how well-informed they were. Eliza led me to the nursery. Maisie sat on the floor, drawing circles with a broken crayon on the wooden boards. Her eyes were locked onto something in the far corner of the room. I turned, but there was nothing there, except the temperature dropped 5 degrees instantly. I knelt beside her. "Maisie, do you see something?" She didn't answer, but drew a shape I recognized instantly. A tall man with red, glowing eyes and antlers for horns. I froze. The red-eyed man. I'd only heard of him once before. In Kentucky, 2017. That case ended with 3 deaths and a fire that wouldn't go out for 4 days. The entity didn't just haunt, it punished. And it thrived on rules. Breaking them was how it got in. "Eliza," I said, voice firm, "tell me the rules you're following." She listed them from memory. Rule number 1, never look in a mirror after sunset. Rule number 2, don't leave shoes facing the bed. Rule number 3, salt every window, every night. Rule number 4, don't speak his name, not even once. Rule number 5, leave milk on the porch at midnight. Then she added, trembling, and never, ever go into the woods when you hear the whistling. I asked when the last incident occurred. "Last night," she said. "He was at the window, tapping. Maisie saw him. She screamed until her nose bled. I stayed the night. At 2:03 a.m., the wind changed. The temperature dropped again. I was in the guest room reviewing Maisie's drawings when I heard the first whistle. faint, slow, drifting through the cracks in the window. The woods outside were pitch black. I stared out through the tinfoil slit and saw nothing. But I knew better than to trust what I saw. I heard it again, closer this time. Then the sound of something brushing against the side of the house, like claws over wood. I grabbed the salt jar and the mirror shard, slid it into my jacket, and quietly made my way to the living room. Eliza and Jonah were asleep on the couch, arms wrapped around their daughter. The fire was dying. I stood by the door. The whistling came again, louder now. It was just beyond the porch. I peeked through the curtain slit, and there he was, tall as the doorway, cloaked in shadow, antlers rising from his skull like twisted branches, and those eyes, blood red and pulsing like embers. He wasn't knocking. He was smiling, and he was pointing, not at the door, but at me. I shut the curtain and backed away. That's when the girl began to scream. Maisie was standing on the couch now, pointing toward the fireplace. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out, just air, forced and rasping. I turned. There was something in the fire. A face, flickering in the flame. His face, laughing. The fire turned blue. The crucifix above the mantel cracked in half and dropped into the embers. I yelled for Jonah to get water, but he was already holding Eliza, who was shaking violently. Her nose was bleeding. So was Maisie's. I threw salt into the flames. The fire exploded in a rush of heat, then vanished. Only smoke remained, and in the ash a single footprint. Not a shoe, a hoof. I knew then the rules were no longer enough. Something had changed. I took out my field notebook and reviewed my own list. I needed to cross-reference their rules with mine. That's when I saw it. Rule 9. If the entity smiles, it has chosen someone. Maisie had seen the smile. So had I. That meant 2 targets. Jonah insisted on leaving the house immediately, but Eliza begged him not to. You know what happened to the last ones who ran? She cried. What happened? I asked. Eliza's hands trembled as she handed me a faded photo. 3 people, smiling at a picnic table. Her sister, brother-in-law, and their daughter. They left, took the car, ignored the rules, and the engine exploded 3 miles down the road. The daughter was missing. They found her 3 days later in a hollow tree. Her eyes were missing. I stepped outside, needing air. The sky was unnaturally dark. I looked toward the tree line, where the fog rolled like waves against the earth. And then I saw them. Dozens of mirror shards, embedded in the bark of the trees, reflecting nothing. No stars, no moon. And in one shard, just for a second, I saw myself, smiling. I didn't sleep. Instead, I set up protective wards around the house. Iron nails hammered into the thresholds, grave dirt sprinkled along the sills, and holy symbols etched into the floorboards. I whispered old names, forgotten even by most priests. By dawn, the forest was silent. But when Maisie came downstairs, she held a piece of paper. Another drawing. This time, it was me, standing in the woods. A red-eyed shadow behind me, whispering into my ear. The caption read, written in a child's uneven scrawl. He said, "You already broke a rule." In a fog-choked ridge of West Virginia, I was called to investigate a family terrorized by the red-eyed man, an ancient entity bound by strict supernatural rules. But when the rules begin to fail and a child's drawing warns that I've broken one, the line between hunter and hunted blurs. Now, I must find a rule I've shattered before he finds me. I didn't speak to anyone that morning. Maisie's drawing had me rattled. Me standing in the woods, the red-eyed man whispering into my ear. Her message. He said, "You already broke a rule." I reviewed my field book, flipping through each rule, cross-referencing with the families. Rule 9 came back to me like a knife in the ribs. If the entity smiles, it has chosen someone. He smiled at me. But what rule had I broken? My mind reeled. I hadn't spoken his name. I never looked in the mirror after sunset. I carried blessed items. I sealed the windows and used salt. The mirror shard. I carried it in my jacket. I checked the time when I pulled it out last night. It was 2:03 a.m. I had looked into it after dark. I had looked into a mirror. My blood turned to ice. I packed my gear and drove into town. The McAllister's house was no longer safe. Something had shifted. His grip had tightened. I needed help from someone who knew this entity more intimately than my books and whispers could offer. That meant Reverend Jessup. He was an old exorcist turned recluse, living in the town of Panther, population 312. He'd gone silent after a failed banishment in 2009 that left a boy dead and 3 parishioners blind. He had investigated the hollow tree case, and legend said he burned half the forest down trying to stop what lived inside it. I found him in a shack behind a broken-down church. The steeple had caved in, and vines choked the bell tower. He was skin and bone, with eyes so pale they looked like frostbite. You saw him. He croaked when I stepped into the chapel turned home. I nodded. Did he smile? Yes. He shut his eyes. Then you're already marked. So's the girl. He poured me black coffee thick as motor oil, then lit a candle and muttered something in Latin I barely recognized. Then he pulled out an old Appalachian book of rites, bound in bark and stitched with red twine. There's one chance. One. But it's dangerous. More dangerous than doing nothing. Jessup nodded slowly. It's called the Hollow Tree Ritual. You'll need to enter the forest during the witching hour. Not before. Not after. Only during. What's the goal? To give him something. A trade. He doesn't kill at random. He plays with balance. If you offer him something older, he may accept. Older. He looked up, dead serious. Bloodline. Memory. An object with pain soaked into it. He turned to a wooden crate and pulled out a small rusted music box. This belonged to my sister. She died in 1972. Body never found. Only this came back from the woods. I kept it for this moment. That night, I returned to the McAllisters and explained the plan. Jonah wanted to pack up and flee. Eliza just sat on the couch, holding Maisie's drawing like scripture. Maisie didn't speak, but she pointed to the edge of the woods through the living room window. She saw something out there. So did I. A shape. Tall. Horned. Waiting. I geared up, taking only what was necessary. My field book, the music box, a vial of my own blood, and a compass blessed by a nun who never spoke a word in her life. I entered the forest at 2:57 a.m. I had 3 minutes before the witching hour. The woods closed in immediately. Fog twisted between the trees like smoke from an unseen fire. The deeper I went, the quieter everything became. Even my footsteps sounded muffled, as though the leaves didn't want to betray my presence. At 3 a.m., the forest changed. The path behind me vanished. The moonlight dimmed, and the whistling began, faint, off-key, echoing all around me. I opened the compass. It spun wildly, then froze, pointing toward a black tree ahead, wider than a truck, hollowed from base to trunk like a burned-out cave. It was the tree. My skin prickled. The air was thick with ozone. Every part of my body screamed to run, but I stepped forward. I laid the music box at the tree's roots. Then I spoke. I offer this in exchange. Let the girl go. Let me go. The wind died. The whistling stopped. I waited. The tree pulsed. A single long, jagged crack split open its bark like a mouth. And something began to crawl out. Not him. Not yet. A memory. I saw my father, dead 20 years, standing in the tree's hollow, staring at me with melted eyes. He reached toward me, and I took a step back. The ground opened beneath me, and suddenly I wasn't in the forest anymore. I was inside the tree. The air was black and wet. I stood on a floor of bone and bark, surrounded by walls that wept blood. Shapes moved in the shadows, whispers without mouths, prayers in reverse. And then I saw him, the red-eyed man. He emerged from the dark, limbs too long, antlers scraping the roof, eyes like coals burning through mist. "You broke the rule," he said, not in words but in thoughts. I nodded. "I offer something older, something deeper." He reached out a hand, if it could be called that. It looked like a root soaked in oil and bone. I held up the music box. He didn't take it. He touched it, and it sank into the air like a stone dropped in water. Then he touched my forehead. A searing pain ripped through me. Flashes of childhood trauma, screams, burning churches, whispering mouths behind mirrors. I dropped to my knees. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the forest. The sun was rising, and the tree was gone. I stumbled back to the house, bloody, shaking, but alive. Maisie was on the porch, smiling faintly. Eliza wept when she saw me. Jonah looked like he'd aged 10 years in a night. Maisie spoke for the first time since I arrived. He said thank you. I nodded slowly. Then she added, "But he wants more next time." That night, I updated my field notebook. Rule 28. A rule once broken leaves a door. The door never truly closes. I stared at my reflection in the Jeep's side mirror. Behind me, just for a moment, a smile. After performing a forbidden ritual deep in the forest, I traded away a memory-laced relic to save Maisie from the red-eyed man. But now the rules are twisting. A new message warns me never to look into a mirror after 3 a.m. But when I wake to find mirrors covered in blood and Maisie humming in reverse, I realize something followed me back, and the rules are changing. The air in the McAllister house had shifted. It wasn't just the smell, though the coppery tang of blood now seemed baked into the wallpaper. It was stillness. Every ticking second felt drawn out, like time was stretching, reluctant to pass. Maisie hadn't spoken since that morning. She sat on the living room floor with a collection of broken doll parts, murmuring in backward syllables. I caught a few. "Iselp ton cool. Iselp ton cool. Don't look. Please don't look." The mirrors in the house were all veiled with towels now. Every single one. The bathroom, the hallway, the bedroom, even a tiny shaving mirror in Jonah's kit. That was his idea. She woke up screaming around 3:12, he said the mirror had teeth. Maisie never screamed. That was what scared me most. I knew I should leave. Every instinct told me to drive away and never look back. But I couldn't, because the red-eyed man wasn't just haunting Maisie anymore. He was using her. That night, I set up a perimeter of protective runes using chalk, sage, and blood ink. I placed a mirror facing outward on each wall and angled them downward, reflecting nothing but the floor. Reverse mirroring was an old technique I'd used before, meant to trap an entity's projection rather than reflect the viewer. The clock read 2:54 a.m. I sat in the kitchen with Eliza, who looked half-starved, knuckles white around a chipped coffee mug. "I didn't tell you everything," she said finally. I stayed quiet. This all started after my father's funeral. We brought home one of his mirrors. He kept it in the basement. I thought it was a family heirloom. Maisie started seeing him in it. I froze. "What kind of mirror?" She reached into a drawer and handed me a faded Polaroid. The photo was grainy, but I recognized it instantly. A wood-framed black mirror, a scrying glass. These were rare, older than Appalachian folklore, older than Christianity. It wasn't a family heirloom. It was a gate. "Where is it now?" I asked, heart racing. "In the attic," Eliza whispered. "But we covered it weeks ago." The clock ticked. 3 a.m., and the mirror upstairs began to hum. I moved fast, up the stairs, past the peeling wallpaper and creaking wood. At the end of the hallway, the attic door pulsed slightly, as if it were breathing. The humming grew louder. It wasn't just sound. It was inside me, reverberating in my bones, like a deep bass echo from a long tunnel. I opened the door. A gust of warm, rotten air hit me in the face. I pulled a salt line across the threshold, stepped in, and turned on my flashlight. The mirror sat at the far end of the attic, covered in a moth-eaten white sheet. The hum was now a whisper, low, guttural, and definitely not English. I inched closer. As I did, I noticed something disturbing. Footprints. Small ones. Bare. They led from the attic stairs to the mirror. I ripped the cover off. The mirror was pitch black. Not reflective, not matte. Just absence. My flashlight didn't even show in it. I pulled out my notebook and added, Rule 34. Do not uncover the scrying glass after 3 a.m. But it was too late. My reflection appeared. Only it wasn't me. It looked like me, but the eyes were gone, hollowed out and dripping something thick and red. The face began to smile, and then it mouthed something I couldn't hear. I leaned in. The attic lights burst. A scream echoed through the house. Maisie's voice, rising like a siren. I bolted down the stairs, 2 at a time, and found Eliza frozen in place, eyes wide, staring at the kitchen wall. A mirror shard, one I had forgotten, was on the table. Maisie stood beside it, blood trickling from her nose, whispering. He said you shouldn't have looked. We spent the next hours in silence, dawn creeping across the windows like salvation. But there was no salvation in this house. Jonah left at first light. He didn't say goodbye. He just drove off, past the pine trees, into the mist. Eliza cried for an hour. Maisie slept like a stone, and I sat outside, watching the forest breathe. I turned to page 9 of my field manual and made one final note before the ink started to bleed. Rule 0. The red-eyed man doesn't kill rule breakers immediately. He waits until you think you're safe. That night, I received a phone call from a number with no ID. I let it ring out. It rang again, and again. On the third ring, I picked up, static, then a child's voice. He said she belongs to the mirror now. I returned to the attic the next night. Maisie had vanished. Eliza was frantic. Police were called, but of course they found nothing. No signs of forced entry. No prints. No scent trails. Just an open attic window and a smear of red handprints on the floor. I sat in front of the mirror at 3:01 a.m. No flashlight. No distractions. Just me and the scrying glass. Then I saw her. Maisie, standing in a black hallway of mirrors, pale and thin, her eyes glowing faintly red. She pressed her hand against the inside of the glass, and behind her, the red-eyed man loomed, antlers curled like burning roots, teeth grinning wide. He whispered something I couldn't hear. Then she mouthed, I'm still here. Maisie has vanished into the mirror. I saw her, trapped in a hallway of reflections, with the red-eyed man behind her. Now, the scrying glass whispers every night. I've broken too many rules. I'm too far in. The entity doesn't want my blood anymore. He wants my name, and if I give it, I'll be bound to him, or worse, become him. I left the McAllister house the next morning. The moment I stepped outside, the air felt different, lighter, like the grip had loosened. Eliza stayed behind, clinging to hope like it was a lifeline made of thorns. She's still here, she told me. I hear her humming sometimes, behind the walls. I couldn't tell her the truth. Maisie wasn't in the house anymore. She was in the mirror realm, and the red-eyed man had her scent. I returned to my cabin, my base of operations in the hills near Canaan Valley. A good 4 hours drive from the McAllister house, shielded by iron-laced soil and natural quartz deposits. No spirits crossed its border. But that night, the phone rang. Same static, same voice. Maisie's, distorted now. Slower, dragging syllables like she was underwater. "You brought me back, but you forgot the name." My stomach twisted, because she wasn't talking about her name. She meant his. I dug deep into my field journals. 20 years of demonology, folklore, Appalachian paganism. The red-eyed man went by many names. None of them is true one. The one who stands backward. He who dwells in the reflection. The false father. All were descriptors, not identities. Naming a demon, especially a reflective one, was dangerous. A real name was a binding tether, a leash if you were powerful enough. But if you guessed wrong, you invited it closer. I contacted the only person I knew reckless enough to attempt a name ritual. A cryptic named Sister Verity who lived in the ruins of an abandoned monastery west of Flat Top. She greeted me with a shotgun and a grin. "You look like hell," she said. "Come inside. Bring salt." Her home was layered with protective wards, salt circles, iron horseshoes nailed to every window. Dozens of cracked mirrors lined the walls, none of them functional. They were traps. We sat in silence as I told her the story. She didn't flinch when I said Maisie had been taken, but she did when I said he wanted a name. "Mirror demons are identity parasites," she said. "They don't just want your name. They want to wear it, walk in it." I nodded. "And if I give it to him, you'll vanish from every mirror on earth. Photos, memories, reflections gone. You'll exist only where he walks." She agreed to help me summon his name. It would take blood, memory, and a trade. I brought my old army dog tags, still crusted with desert sand. She drew a circle of ash and bone in the chapel basement, lit candles made from wax and teeth. Then she slid her palm and whispered, "Come forth, Echo Walker. Come forth, fleshless name." The shadows recoiled, candles sputtered, and the mirror at the far end of the room shivered. I felt pressure in my chest, like something reaching through my ribs. Then I heard it. A name, a real one, whispered like a scream behind glass. Askareth. I staggered. My ears bled. Verity collapsed. It wasn't a sound meant for human minds. Just holding it in my memory made my skin crawl, my bones itch. I left the monastery at dawn with the name burned into me like a second heartbeat. 3 nights passed. The mirrors in my cabin began to fog from the inside. Every surface reflected a different version of me. Some older, some younger. One was blind, one was smiling, but one looked like Maisie. She pressed her hand to the mirror and mouthed, "Don't say it." Then the glass cracked. Rule 41. Never speak a true name aloud after hearing it in a mirror. But I had to. There was only one way to open a gate back into the mirror world. I needed to return to the McAllister house. Back to the attic. Back to the scrying glass. I arrived at dusk. Eliza was gone. So was the salt line. The attic stank of rot and mildew. The mirror waited, black as night, breathing. I cut my palm, drew the sigil of crossing. 3 circles interlocked, each bisected by a horizontal line. Then I whispered, "Askareth." The mirror didn't break. It opened. There was no impact, no transition. One moment I stood in the attic. The next, I was in a corridor made of mirrors, stretching into infinity. The floor reflected my every step. The ceiling warped. My heartbeat echoed like thunder, and the air smelled like grief. I walked, and each mirror whispered memories. My mother's funeral, the first demon I banished, the child I couldn't save in Pine Hollow, Maisie, reaching for me. I kept walking. Time didn't move here. The reflections stopped showing memories. Now they showed possibilities. Me hanging by the neck. Me with hollow eyes. Me as the red-eyed man. I started to forget why I came. Then I saw her. Maisie. She was standing in a room of floating shards, each one showing a different version of her, smiling, screaming, rotting, glowing. She looked up as I entered. "Don't let him name you," she whispered. "That's how he gets in." Too late. Behind me, he stepped out of the reflection. Askareth, the red-eyed man. Twisted antlers. No face. Just a shifting mask of my own. He spoke in 1,000 voices. "Give me a name. I'll give her back." Maisie shook her head violently. "You can't trust him," she screamed. "He speaks in mirrors. Truth becomes poison." My mouth opened, but I didn't speak my name. I spoke his. Askareth. The mirror world rippled. The red-eyed man screamed, not in pain, but in delight. He tricked me. By naming him, I had given him a foothold in reality. He wasn't bound. He was anchored. The mirrors began to crack. The corridors split, shards floating like leaves in a hurricane. Maisie grabbed my hand. "We have to jump." To where? To somewhere without mirrors. She didn't explain. We ran. The glass world collapsed around us. Every reflection screamed. And then we jumped into a shard of light, into a place I didn't understand. I woke in the McAllister attic. So did Maisie. But the mirror was gone. Only dust and a black scorch mark remained. I checked every mirror in the house. They were normal again. Maisie no longer whispered backwards. Her eyes no longer glowed. She ate, laughed, slept. But every time she passed a mirror, she turned her face away. And me? I noticed something else. I have no reflection. Maisie's back, but something followed us out of the mirror realm. I said the red-eyed man's true name, Askareth. I thought it would banish him. Instead, it gave him an anchor to our world. I saved her, but now I have no reflection. And when I close my eyes at night, he walks behind them. I've destroyed every mirror in my house. Windows, too. Even the ripples in my sink water make me flinch. I used to see a face looking back. Now there's just absence. Maisie hasn't said a word since we returned. Not about the mirror. Not about the voices. Not about the thing that looked like her. She's quiet, but her shadows don't match her movements. They twitch when she's still. Rule 44. If a person casts no reflection, and yet their shadow moves, run. I visited Eliza again. She didn't recognize me. Literally. She squinted when she opened the door. Asked me who I was. Where Maisie was. I told her everything. She laughed. "Maisie's been dead for 15 years, she said. There was a photo on her fireplace. A funeral. Casket. Maisie, 9 years old. Drowned in the garden pond. Buried in the town cemetery." My hands trembled. My voice vanished. What about the calls?" I asked. She tilted her head. "What calls?" That night, I returned to my cabin and flipped through the notebook I kept from the mirror world. The pages were blank now, except for one. The final rule, written in someone else's handwriting. Rule 66. You can bring them back, but something else will come with them. I turned toward the bedroom. Maisie was standing at the door, smiling, but she wasn't blinking. Have you ever seen a mask try to act like a person? That's what it felt like. Askareth hadn't just come through the mirror. He split himself. One piece of me, one in her. That's why I have no reflection. That's why her shadow dances when she sleeps. He's using us as vessels. I decided to end it. One final ritual. One last invocation. Not to banish him, but to trade myself for her. I didn't ask her permission. I couldn't be sure she was still in there. I drove to the burned ruins of Sister Verity's monastery. The circle was still scorched into the chapel floor. The candles were still melted down to bone stubs. I brought a mirror, a big one, cracked but intact. I poured salt, laid down my dog tags, pricked my palm, then I said his name backwards. Terexa. Blood hissed on stone. The mirror began to pulse, like a heart. Then he stepped through. He didn't look like me anymore. He looked like everything I could have been. A hero, a monster, a father, a corpse, all stitched together with grins. He didn't speak this time. He just pointed to the mirror. A deal. I walk in. Maisie walks out. Simple. I took one step forward. The mirror shimmered. A hallway of memories stretched out behind it. My childhood, my failures, my sins. Then Maisie's voice called from behind me. Don't. She was standing in the doorway, tears in her eyes, hands shaking. Don't give him what he wants, she said. He doesn't trade. He takes. The shadows in the room bent toward her, toward me. Then Askareth tilted his head and, for the first time, spoke plainly. You were never meant to survive this. Suddenly I understood. All the hauntings, all the rules, all the cases I'd taken across Appalachia. They weren't isolated. They were preparation. Askareth had been grooming me, teaching me how to open doorways, how to break seals, how to speak names. Every demon I banished, every sigil I carved, it was training. Because I was always meant to be the final doorway. I dropped the mirror. It shattered into 700 shards. Askareth screamed, a sound like bones being chewed. Maisie ran to me. I'm sorry, I whispered. Then I stabbed the iron dagger, the one I'd always kept under my coat, straight into my chest. My blood sprayed across the broken mirror. A final sacrifice. The mirror didn't break again. It absorbed the blood like soil. The pieces began to vibrate, then melt, then burn. Askareth thrashed. Shadows whipped through the chapel. Candles exploded in white flame. And then, silence. He was gone. I woke up 3 days later, in a hospital bed, Maisie beside me, real, breathing, smiling. And this time, her shadow matched her movement. I asked her the date. She told me it was October 31st, Halloween, and I realized he'd waited for this day all along. Because Halloween is when the veil is thinnest, when names hold the most power, when mirrors remember. Maisie handed me a compact mirror. I flinched, but then I saw something I hadn't seen in weeks. My reflection, tired, scarred, but mine. The mirror world had closed. The rules finally obeyed. But before she left the hospital room, Maisie paused, tilted her head, and whispered, There's still one rule left, you know. My throat went dry. She turned slowly, her eyes shimmering faintly, and said, Rule 77, don't trust what you bring back. The end.